Hello and welcome to the B&B show. My name is Brandon Kane here at the Hawks Nest, and the guy right to my left here, that's going to be Seahawks Brendan Nelson. And we get to come at you today on the heels of the Seahawks getting another victory on their belt, the second one in 2 weeks, the second victory with a fourth quarter comeback, a furious fourth quarter comeback to bring it home. Brendan, I'm sure you're feeling pretty good today, but we always got to check with each other on after the last one. How you feeling today here on the heels of this win?
Say I'm feeling all right. I say I'm in a pretty good place right now, all things considered. Where we were 2 weeks ago compared to where we are now, it's not even close. So we're headed in the right direction. We can say that.
We certainly can say that, and it wasn't a victory about style points. And by the way, it's good to have you in the house here. Uh, we certainly aren't going to get a lot of style points on this one, but I think this is one that you and I have been pretty uniform or in unison on in the respect of get the W by any means necessary. Just come out of it with a W. And that's what we're looking for. It doesn't mean there aren't some things for the good and the bad to chop up, which we will do today here, Brendan. But they did do that. They did get it done. They tested many of our hearts out there and coronary valves. But where, with that good and bad weighing, as I like to ask you again on this too, where do you come in on the other side of this, at the other side of this game, as far as how you're feeling coming out of this game? Other than, yeah, you're feeling good with the win. You're in the playoff hunt. You now have control of your destiny. You feel good about those things. But from the game itself, what were some of your overview takeaways?
Well, the start of the game went the way I thought. I think the Seahawks coming out flat in this game was one of the most predictable events of 2023. They're coming off that big win against Philly. It's a short week. They're traveling across the country. Like, this was always going to be a slow start for the Seahawks, and it was. Oh, by the way, their starting quarterback had been out the last 2 games. It was his first game back. So there was always going to be some degree of it was going to be kind of like one of the Huskies after they beat Oregon the first time this year, when they came out against Arizona State and just plain did not show up for basically 55 minutes. But once we got into like that second quarter and third quarter, and the team still wasn't really showing up, it was still a very flat performance. I started to get a little bit disturbed. I started to get a little bit unhappy with what I was seeing, and it does still strike me that this team is undisciplined. This team this team doesn't seem to have a good understanding of how to keep their heads on straight in particularly stressful times, with the exception of a handful of players on offense that we'll get to, of course, a little bit later. But it's very disconcerting to see your run defense deteriorate to this point, because that was one of the focuses of the offseason. I think it's very telling. I think it's a terrible indictment on this coaching staff and front office that they're terrible in run defense last year. They spend this offseason trying to fix it. And here we are basically having the exact same problems that we had last year, to pretty much the exact same level. So that is something that I look at and I go, it's really hard to imagine this team going far, even if they do make the playoffs, which it does look like they will. And I want to make the playoffs. And even if we don't make it far, I'd still rather make it than not make it.
Hmm.
But I do look at these things and I just wonder, how did we spend the offseason trying to fix this? And yet this is where we are, where a team quarterbacked by washed up Ryan Tannehill with one good receiver can still run the ball at will on us pretty much.
Yeah, it's interesting from my perspective on that too. It did seem like there were some times where they were really targeting, of course, that two man, two down lineman, however we want to call this thing. It's certainly not a three man. They did go to more 3-4 fronts as the game wore on, which was nice to see, Brendan. And I think that they had a plan in place early on where they want to go to that base defense. I think a little bit more, because the Titans would commit to more of the two tight ends, and so they go, okay, we won't go nickel, we'll go base. But then you lose, of course, then Jordan Brooks, and then you had to sort of throw that out the door. But they had a few good shots in the game that they showed from behind, where you have the Hawks, of course, the two defensive tackles aligned close, and then the outside lineman. Not, I know you know this, Brendan, but I'm just saying this for the audience's sake. You have the outside linebackers then aligned to the outside wide, and so there's this natural space between the defensive tackles to your outside stand-up linebackers in wide nine. So then what the Titans do is they take their interior linemen and they dedicate two interior linemen, kind of duo block, combo block, whatever you want to call it, right into those defensive tackles. And so they instantly get a real good push up in the middle of that line, and those defensive tackles don't have guys on their shoulders to their outside shoulders. So it's really on those two to hold up on those two dual blocks. And it's not like then it remains with those two blocks where they stay on them. They then one of them then peels off quickly to then go get the edge or go get the linebacker. And so it's hard not to have that initial push when you have kind of that soft defensive line to look like to me at times in this game, Brendan. And I don't know where the answer for him is, it because that's something that just seems to come back sometimes to the you just shouldn't maybe run as much of these 2-man fronts. Maybe it's, go back to maybe more of the 4-man fronts or find I like their 3-4 adjustment. I will say that I did like to see the coaching staff go to the base. We're seeing some different adjustments to at least trying to attempt to stop the run in this game, Brendan, which in the past we haven't. Sometimes it's, well, we'll just stay in nickel. And when they go to a heavier formation, and that was the part that I did like to see, but it is definitely frustrating to understand that you did spend so much of this offseason with the concentration on let's get the run defense fixed up first and foremost. And even after Leonard Williams trade, it still is remaining just kind of a sinking, leaky vessel when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Other than that, this was like one of those really weird games where neither team gets the ball like ever. The Titans had 8 possessions in this game, and 2 of them were at the end of the half with less than a minute to go. The end of the first half, end of the second half. And the Seahawks had 7 possessions in this game. So that's always going to like throw things off a little bit. It's very weird when you have a game where both teams don't have like 10 possessions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you get a lot of that running, that clock just keeps motoring. There those passing completions to stop the clock. So it's weird. Some of those NFL, to your point, you can get in the NFL, you can get really 2 wildly different games played, as versus one to the other in that respective things. Where you get a game that's extended out like hell and there's 132 plays in the game. And then those like this one where it's drawn down to a bare minimum.
I think there were like 6 possessions in the first 4 minutes of the New England Denver game, actually, like because there was the turnover, then the 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. So I think it was 6 possessions in like 4 or 5 minutes or something weird like that. So it's just one of those things that really messes up the flow. And I think it kind of ruins perception of this game, because I came away from this game thinking the offense actually played really well, given the fact that Geno missed a couple of throws in the red zone early on. Maybe partially because he was coming off the injury and he was rusty, but he had a couple opportunities to make plays in that first 3 quarters that he didn't hit. But I came away thinking the offense actually played fairly well and that the defense really didn't, given the fact that there were so few possessions in this game. So a lot of people came away from that game thinking, well, we only allowed 17 points. That's pretty good. I don't think allowing 17 points on 6 real drives is really much of an accomplishment. So I think there's a little bit of perception not matching up with reality in a game like this as well. So I'm still kind of in the same place mentally with that, where I've been before with this defense, where they're not good.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think I do find myself a little bit more in the feeling good about this defensive performance, because when I do look back to, let's say, just 2 years ago with the same Tannehill at quarterback, this, Tennessee team that albeit had a lot different personnel than they do now, for the most part, there's still a lot of parts that are also the same. And they came into your house and they mollywopped you offensively in the passing game. They mollywopped you in the ground game. You came into this game, 25 attempts. Tannehill got nothing done as far as passing the ball. You also got 6 sacks on those 25 drop back attempts. And I thought that for the first time in a lot of weeks, the pass rush came alive and really became a part that was, especially at the end there when you needed it. That's been something that's been completely missing from the defense. And that did show up. It wasn't them really blitzing. It was just the guys getting home from the four down fronts and Bobby blitzing on one of the times. But that's where I came down to, is even though they did get a lot of runs, they did have a lot of yards on the ground. I acknowledge for sure they did with that. You kept the yard per carry average in relatively good hold for the most part. Tannehill kind of skews it with his 2 carries, but if you remove that out, you didn't do, there's not but 6 or 7 yards attempt like we've had with McCaffrey at times playing him this year, right? Where you just you're letting him get a first down run almost every time he's getting the ball. But it was a problem. I'm not trying to oversell the run game issues in this were where you were at your worst as far as that goes.
I mean, the Tannehill runs were a big deal is the thing. Like those were actually game flipping runs that he had. I think he converted like a 3rd and 14 or something. So I do agree with you about the pass rush, though. That was the one thing on this defense that really worked. And that's why, you look at this game at the end and we allowed 125 passing yards on 33 dropbacks. That's excellent. You're allowing 125 net yards on 34 dropbacks. That's very much winning football. Very much. So you're right.
Yeah. I mean, it's the running game though still is something that I think you're also right on this to be worried about, because we talked about getting to the playoffs, dealing with maybe an Eagles team now that feels like they can have Hurts keeping those read options where they weren't doing in that as much in the regular season, and really challenging you in the ground game. I know we played them a couple weeks ago and dealt with it, but still going to be tough. You're going to have to bring the big boy pants in that kind of game to deal with their ground game. Certainly is going to be the case with a team like the Niners, and even a team like Detroit that can run the ball, when they want to commit to it and go at it. They got the line that can take it to you. So that can end up being a part that really hurts us if we can get to the playoffs. If we can't be stronger at it or start to find a little bit more of that same formula that they had early on in the year, Brendan, when they were able to be much better in this respect. Let's stay with the defense here on this one, and look a little bit at what did you see? What do you think allowed for them to have the success in the pass coverage? Is it just that the pass rush was so much there when he was dropping back in Tannehill and he wasn't having the time to be back there? Were the guys just, in your opinion, covering it up so good? Was there anything different you were seeing from the Hawks in what they were doing in the coverages on the back end?
I do think it was mostly that pass rush. We were obviously a little undermanned in the secondary with no Witherspoon and no Adams, although some people would argue that not having Adams is not a thing. I still I've kind of been saying, like, we need to figure out what we can do with him while we have him, because we've got him for at least 2, maybe 3 more games, maybe 4 even. So we got to figure out what we can do with him while he's here, because there's got to be some value he can add. And I feel like that value is going to be positive as long as you do this the right way. You find the right situations and you use them in the right you use him properly. Like, maybe the strategy is you play him every other week. Maybe the strategy is you only play him 15-20 snaps a game. I don't know, but you need to figure out what you can do with him, and I do think there is some scenario where he makes this defense better.
Agree. Yeah, I think so too. It's a big part of his problems here have not just been Jamal sucks. Certainly it's not even the head of the issue that he now sucks. It's not that at all. It is certainly misuse. You just have to, I think, to your point, Brendan, commit to no more back there as a single high safety or 2 high safety looks for Jamal. It just doesn't make any sense to have him back there doing that at this point, especially with Julian Love doing what he's doing back there. Keep him down around the box. That's what do you want to fill in for Jordan Brooks? It looks like he's got the ankle injury now. I mean, fine. If you want to have him come in as the slot from time to time, do that. I mean, I'm not necessarily loving that, but hey, okay. Just keep him out of that point where he's going to be back 30, 40 yards off the ball, having to play the ball in the air. It's chewing gum and rubbing his belly at the same time kind of stuff, where it's just, it can't be done, I don't think, at this point. But I agree. There's still a way he can, especially in helping in the run defense, Brendan. If you can, he is a guy that can still at times flash in that run defense and come up and give you, show you some of what made him such a great run defender coming out of college and how he was viewed and how he was with the Jets early on in his career.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think our secondary played poorly or anything. I think Woolen actually played a really solid game. He almost had the pick 6, and people got hung up on the fact that he shouldn't have dropped it. But it's also a really good play for him to be in position to get that ball. So that was one of Woolen's best games of the year, I think, despite dropping that, where it wasn't an easy catch. It looked a lot easier than it initially, than it actually was, I think. Mike Jackson, he's actually been playing really solidly. I don't get that guy, though. It seems like his career it's a roller coaster, man. Sometimes he looks like he doesn't belong in this league. Sometimes he looks like a quality starter. I don't know. It just seems very random. But they played well. I don't have any big problems with what they did. I thought Julian Love played pretty good. I thought that Quandre Diggs played pretty much fine. The only guy in the secondary that bugged me with his performance really was Kobe Bryant. He hasn't looked good all year, so that's not surprising, but I think he was a big problem for us in this game. I think he actually, not just with the stuff that shows up on the highlight reel in a negative way, but the snap to snap impact of Kobe Bryant was pretty substantial in this game, in my opinion. And I do think our pass rush was the bigger of the two impacts on the Tennessee passing game.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Kobe's definitely been pretty quiet and not really brought a lot when he's been on the field this year. I like the guys you mentioned. Mike, it's Mike Jackson will look like a rugged corner that can hang in there, and he'll hit with his competitive and feistiness, even though he's not the fastest guy he can hang. But then you do indeed at times, other times go, man, he can't stop and start. All that stuff ain't working. But he did play a good game. The Tariq play, to your point on that too, is that he's got to get up to full speed to undercut that ball. And when you're running kind of foot and you're trying to catch is one thing. When you're going full out and then you got to extend full out to go make the grab, it's an easier said than done deal. And I like you, just love to see him making that play. It was sort of shades of the Detroit game last year where he got the pick six, where he undercut that dig route. And he's got the speed to do that in the future on those kind of routes. Some of the key to it is just, are you in man match or are you in truly man? Because if you're in man match, he's got to first, of course, stay up on top first. And that's what makes that play even more, to me, impressive, because he's probably in that play playing man match, meaning he's got to first make sure the guy's not getting over the top, then get back on the route, undercutting on the dig route, and then undercut it and make the play. So there's actually a lot there to make that happen from Tariq's standpoint, which was very impressive. You mentioned Julian Love and Quandre. I thought on top of the sacks and pressures that the defense brought this week, Brendan, the hitting got brought back into bear in a way that we haven't seen here throughout this season. We oftentimes are very nice in our tackling technique. One guy likes to hug and then another guy likes to hug. It's kind of just, waiting for the group hug to set in before the actual tackle is going to occur. But here you got him lighting guys up. Quandre digs down around the line of scrimmage. And I'd love to see your thoughts on this. One thing I really like with Julian Love that he allows you to do is you can play the true split safety look, which now frees Quandre to come up down now the box and actually lay some of those hits.
Yeah. And that's something he hasn't been able to do for a while, it feels like. That's something that we haven't seen from him in years. And it makes sense, right? He started out as a nickel corner, right? In Detroit, he was a nickel corner. So that run support stuff should be in his bag somewhere. I know he's a lot older now.
He was a strong safety too. And to your point, you just haven't run it because you've not had a guy that could play free safety like with the position over there at the strong safety. You've had a box guy next to him at all times. And so he's not been freed up to be able to do that. So he's had to play by necessity that single high role.
Right. So I mean, Julian Love, one thing that stood out to me when I looked at him after we signed him was his versatility. His last year on the Giants, he had hundreds of snaps as a strong safety, hundreds of snaps as a free safety, and he played several dozen snaps as a linebacker and as a nickel corner, and I think even some snaps as an outside corner. He was doing it all. Now, I know he doesn't do all of it as well as he does the main stuff that he does. But there is a lot of versatility there that you need in that Fangio scheme. So obviously, I think that one way or the other, the Seahawks are going to clear the deck at safety a little bit this offseason. But if we want to give Julian Love like a full season to just play every snap and see how he fits in with this new defense, I could see that working out pretty well. I definitely think that's probably the way to go at this point. I don't think we're going to want to get down to a bunch of rookies at safety. I think you do want to have one veteran there at least.
Especially when you have him on that single year of a contract at a kind of it's not a bargain rate, but a pretty fair rate for where you're paying at that point for what you're getting bang for buck wise. So it just makes sense all the way down the line to roll with it and then accommodate you to draft guys and not feel like they're rushed to get out there and start. Brendan, the competition's king. You truly have a kind of a battle there for who starts and who doesn't, which if we're looking at where we go with the future of the safety position, not the worst way to go if we're going to have to kind of rebuild it a bit because we've got to start to cut away some of the salary, but it's still nice to see those hits out there in that secondary and kind of letting guys know we're here. I don't even mind Quandre drawing the flag, Brendan, on the play where he got the helmet, kind of grazed the guys, went past the guy's thing. I'm like, hey, I'm okay with that. I think like sometimes I'm like, yeah, if you can kind of send that message that, hey, when we're secondary, you're going to catch that ball, but you're going to get whacked. That stuff can add up, especially a game like this where you have 3, 4, 5 hits. And we didn't get to see it really raise up into the third or fourth quarter, Brendan, because of the nature of the way that the offense was starting to click and stuff. But then that's when you start to get those alligator arm receivers and guys not quite, going full bore for those catches. You get the weird drops that don't make sense. It's because they're hearing footsteps. They think the thunder's coming.
Yeah.
Tezakaku, thank you for the $2.79 donation from Canada. Hope you're doing well up north. He says, who's winning? Whites versus blacks bowl game? A little bit of a loaded question here from Tezakaku.
Well, the white team would not have any cornerbacks, right? They would have Riley Moss. And that's literally it. They would line up. They would probably line up guys like Julian Edelman at corner. They would line up guys like, they'd find white wide receivers who could line up at a corner. And I imagine the black team would just throw for an 80-yard touchdown on every play because they're not real cornerbacks. By the way, Riley Moss has looked kind of bad so far, I think. So they don't even have a good corner.
That's true. I mean, you're not going to be able to call anybody on there, and that's saying nothing to safety, right? We got a couple. There's a couple of them, but I mean, there ain't anybody that's like game changing out there at safety. So your whole secondary is going to be in trouble. Now, we maybe in the trenches it gets a little bit more interesting. I thought offensively the Whites just have to run some 4 tight end sets, I guess. Maybe something along those lines.
Yeah, does Mahomes play one half for one team?
I know who gets Mahomes. It'll be like the Chappelle draft. Remember the Chappelle racial draft he had?
I remember that one.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
That's what we'll have to do on the players that are on the cusp, I think, is we'll just have to be like the Whites get Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know. I think it's gonna probably be hard for the Whites to pull that off there to Zakaka without having a secondary. If you're missing a whole positional group and it's the same as not true to the other side, then it might be hard to get that one going at that point.
The black team won't be able to kick though, right? They don't have a kicker.
Just go for it. Why they have to kick if they go for it every time.
Yeah, that's true.
So
yeah, I think so.
Gotta give him the nod on that one though. Thank you though, Tezagaku. Appreciate you. It's an interesting discussion. Then another part of this that was funny is somebody was saying, well, who gets the Polynesians?
Which is actually not a minor deal.
No, it's not. That's what I'm saying. Like
that's no small thing.
Yeah, it becomes an argument for it.
Mm-hmm.
Corey Combe, thank you for the $2 donation. The refs are a joke in the NFL, and they should be embarrassed.
Feels like it's worse than ever.
Yeah, it's definitely, I agree, Corey, at this point, a worse than ever state with Brendan on this one. Making them full-time would certainly be a step in the right direction. I think some of it is that, in that they can't stick to it like a craft. I think a big part of it, though, to me, Brendan, is that you've added so many rules through the years, and there is so much subjectivity to these rules that they keep adding, that to me it becomes kind of inevitable that you're going to end up with kind of a train wreck as far as this is concerned, because every little minor misstep left or right now suddenly becomes a bone of contention for whether or not it should be a flag or not. And that's to me where the NFL needs to more streamline the rule book and not make it so convoluted. And then I think the refs would be much better just suited by that alone, but also making them full-time is to me a big step in the right direction.
Yeah. I think so. I don't know what. I know that there's like some reason why they've been very hesitant to do that. I can't remember what it is. I mean, like, this is the most lucrative sports league in the history of the world, is the thing. Like, this isn't like basketball and baseball teams lose money. No NFL team is losing money.
That's true. But also in that respect, like, look at what, like, for instance, grass, and not having grass on every NFL stadium versus what that does to the damage the players that get injured at a higher rate on the turf and whatnot. They don't want to do that, Brendan, because it's more expensive to maintain the grass year round and all of that. And so they go, well, how much more of a cost, really? What are we talking? Like $1 million more a year to do your grass in your stadium, right? So that you protect your players and they're healthier. Like, it would be worth you. That's the thing. The NFL can get kind of penny pinched when you wouldn't think they would at weird spots. And I think this is one of those ones where I think it's a little bit of one of those weird spots they're sort of penny pinching, we expand them to full time, and now we got to deal with the ref union, and that, it becomes I think it's one of those things they just as soon as be like, part time.
Yeah,
you're a contractor.
Yeah, and I know, like, I think there was some fear of having full time, like there was some concern as it related to like gambling as well. But now that the NFL's pushing gambling so much, I don't think that argument holds any water anymore. So yeah, you got to do it. I imagine there's a pretty reasonable amount of money you could pay the referees. Just it would cost the league a few million a year, and everything would be cool. Everything would be fine.
Yeah, and you mentioned gambling. You think it provides more of a draw for a ref to go on the take if they're only being paid a part-time salary versus the full-time salary they could be, and how that might then cause them a little bit more to be dissuaded from trying to take those steps to do that, right? So
Mm.
if they're trying to maintain or be careful with that, you'd think that. But thank you, Corey. Well said. It's been a disaster year with the NFL and reffing, and they're going to need to maybe start to really truly try to address this off season. Dark Joke, thank you for the $2 donation. If the Hawks make the playoffs, do they still draft a quarterback, Brendan?
Well, to me, these two things are separate from each other.
Mm.
These are two not correlated events. The Seahawks making the playoffs and the Seahawks drafting a quarterback. I don't think one should influence the other at all, really. An example was there's a Broncos analyst account on Twitter who I think it was a few days ago. He posted 2 tweets with polls in them, and he asked 2 questions in each, one in each tweet. The first tweet was, "Do you want the Broncos to keep Russell Wilson next year if they make the playoffs?" And then the next tweet was, "Do you want the Broncos to keep Russell Wilson next year if they miss the playoffs?" And both poll results were basically identical. About 88% said no, I don't want him, right?
Jeez. Denver's
And
gotten out on Bruss quick, huh? Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
so basically, and then after that, those polls were closed. He was like, "I like that people are treating that question as independent of what the team does, because that should not be the thing that changes whether or not you want to keep Russ or you don't want to keep Russ, right? Because
Right.
the question is he worth the money he's going to be making? Is he worth that contract? That should have nothing to do with whether or not you make the playoffs.
Mhm.
So I think it's not being results oriented with your thinking. Basically, it's making sure that you're keeping everything independent of each other. I think that this team, even if they win the Super Bowl, if the Seahawks win the Super Bowl, they should maybe still draft a quarterback. Or they could miss the playoffs and still not draft a quarterback. It depends on how they view the quarterback that they have. And I don't think that evaluation should be determined by whether or not this particular team makes the playoffs. Now, for me personally, if I had to guess, I would say that John wants to draft a quarterback and that Carroll does not. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a battle this offseason.
I could definitely see that. Certainly, if Carroll's in that position, kind of more in a win now mode right now, I don't know how much time I have, sort of kind of thought process on it. I think you're also touching on something that tends to drive us crazy with certain things, Dark Joke, as far as like if the team's looking at it this way, which is you never want the team looking at it, making a decision based on sort of one matter. I'm going to make my decision based on just this. It'd be like, well, no, it's more about basing it on this. Take Jamal Adams. Do you want to let Jamal go because he's good or bad? Well, no, we don't just do that. We go, is he going to be good in the future? Is he going to be recovered in the future? Is it more beneficial to save that cash and cut him and get the cap savings and put those resources in other places? So when the drive always comes down to the simple in the NFL or the football, Dark Joke, from my perspective, I always drive away from it because so much of the decision making is more impacted by a variety of things rather than just a one thing. And like Brendan also said, I agree with him. I do think that the drafting of the quarterback, and I've said, Brendan, you can correct me because we've been doing this a couple of years on the draft coverage for the most part. Have I at any point in time in our pre-draft coverage leading in draft said that I believe the Seahawks are drafting a quarterback this year?
No, I mean, we've talked about it as a possibility, of course, but I
Sir.
don't think we've ever really said, like, oh, we're definitely going to do it. In fact, if I had to guess, I would say we probably get one sometime in day 3 that we look at as being like likely a backup with maybe a little bit of upside. I don't think we're spending our first round pick on a quarterback. Maybe one of our third round picks, but I don't believe that Pete Carroll is looking at this team and thinking, Geno's the problem. I need to move off Geno as soon as possible. I think he still loves Geno, and I think he's still very optimistic about where this team is going with him. Now, that doesn't mean you don't draft a quarterback, especially in a pretty good QB class like I feel like this is. But I don't see us forcing it, and I don't see us drafting somebody we don't actually like that much because, we need a quarterback. I think that the decision needs to be made based on other factors than just that.
I agree with you. I don't come down to feeling like a first round quarterback's the one that's going to be the one that happens here, dark joke. But I do think that the quarterback happens in this draft more than I have felt for years going into a draft. And my sneaking suspicion here is that John Schneider is going to fall in love with one of those guys between the second and fourth round. There'll be some guy that catches his eye like Russell did. Not a guy that's like Russell necessarily. Maybe he has some parts of him that are like Russ, but just a quarterback that John really buys into and says, I know this guy can do it. And from his perspective, even putting a third round pick on a QB like that is sort of like putting penny stock investment into something that actually has a decent likelihood to be really good for you potentially, especially if you trust your evaluations and if John is as potentially good at finding quarterbacks as you and I think he might just be. So I do think that there's going to be a guy taking your dark joke. I don't know which one it's going to be, but I think John will fall in love with one because this is such a rich draft from between the second and fourth round for quarterbacks. There are so many guys there that could make some sense. Guys who played a lot of football, guys with a lot of productivity, guys who played against tough competition. Not just guys you have to squint your eyes to kind of make them into legit prospects. So it's happening, I think, in this draft more than I've thought in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dark. Snail with a $2 donation says, I want Love and Jaden Hicks as our safeties next year. Have we gotten comfort? You were mentioning before Jaden Hicks might be going back to school. Is he coming out?
He certainly doesn't have to come out. Maybe he believes that he'll be like a round 3 pick or something. And he's like, it's not going to get too much better than that. So let's just go and start getting my money. Because while Jaden Hicks is clearly a good player and he was really good for the Cougars last year, he's not necessarily somebody who's going to make big bank with the NIL money. So he is somebody who wants to start the clock on his NFL contract. So I think that he's like a sophomore or something. So he definitely doesn't have to come out.
I'm looking right now and I don't see any I don't see any mention that he's declared.
Okay.
So
there's time for him to still do it, right? It's not.
Yeah. They give you the chance to put in your evaluation to the pros of where they think you'll go, right? They got that whole cool committee thing where you'll be about a third round pick according to Bump to Bump. So the players in his position like this will submit to find out where he'll go. I do think he's probably a third round pick right now if he goes, but to your point, because he is so young, and Snail, to your point, because he's so young, you're getting a guy now who you sort of grab who, if he comes out the next year, he's pushing up into the top of the first round and maybe top second round territory, but you're grabbing him this year in the third round as kind of that investment pick. I don't mind it. And I like Hicks. I have a third round grade on him. So I would be okay taking him in that neighborhood of things, and you'd have a pretty rugged safety crew at that point between Love and Hicks, because both guys are going to tackle. They're going to come up and help you on that part of it.
The aggregate big board, I think, has him going undrafted right now. So they might just not really have him on their radar.
That's one of those ones you're going to have to do some forecasting, right? Because of that thing, he is so young. He is the sophomore. The production's there, but there's also some. I had one game I watched of him against, might have been Colorado or Stanford. I forget which one it was, that he had a couple points. He gave up some plays on, but he's really got he's got an NFL kind of body. He moves around like an NFL defender, and he's going to hit and tackle in a way that's hard to find at times now in drafts, and especially even at the safety position. So, I mean, he's a true strong safety to me. You're not going to be able to move him. So maybe that digs some of his value, Brendan, where they go, well, you can't do the split safety stuff because you're going to have to be as strong. But
yeah,
I think he'd be a hell of a strong safety who can give you some coverage ability.
Yeah. I had him in my most recent mock draft on what was it I did? I think it was like a week and a half ago I did a mock draft. Now granted, I had him going in the 7th round because as of right now, that's where the aggregate big board has him. That's probably not going to hold.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes players slip through the cracks and it's like really weird and doesn't make sense, but it happens. Every year there's like, how did that guy fall that far? And maybe he'll be one of them. It's always on the table.
Yeah. He'll be our Talafunga hula funga. Maybe like that.
Or like Luke Whippler last year. I thought he was going to be a 2nd or 3rd round pick. He was like, what, a 6th?
Yeah. Boy, he dipped. He dipped big time. Thank you though, Snail. Appreciate the donation. Cameron, thank you for the $5 donation. Should we try other players out as punt kick returners? I truly think Dallas is a liability at returning punts. Can't have that in the playoffs.
Yeah, he started out pretty good too, man. It's frustrating. Like early in this year, I was pretty happy with him. I thought he was doing a good job getting the yards that were there. He was giving us a field position advantage consistently, but it's deteriorated, man. He lets the ball hit the ground too much. Now he's like, I know the guy probably should have gotten fair catch interference, but that was a very weird thing to make him flip out about to the point where he's throwing a punch. Like
Yeah.
it's not that big of a deal. Why is that setting you off so much? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, let the official call the flag. You got tapped into. I know it's not you feel vulnerable there because you're looking at the ball and you get kind of banged into, but like, and then he throws the punch. Like, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, I know it wasn't a true punch. He's just sort of like, but it looks like a punch. And you go, how do you not? And then you get down. It's one of those moments you talked about earlier in the show tonight. Some of the undisciplined moments that stand out to you where you go, look, this is beyond the pale kind of stuff at times. It's John Radigan last week, Brendan, knocking that ball in a punt for no particular reason. No reason to do that move, just down the punt like every other person in the NFL does when they go down to down a punt. He decides to get cute in that moment, and you get a 15-yard flag. Would really like if they could remove some of these moments that they're unforced. You don't have to do this stuff. Nothing's drawing you to make that happen. You can just stand back and go, yeah, let it go here in the moment. You play 20 snaps a game, DJ, like just chill. But can we get somebody? Is there? I don't think there's even a Hester type out there right now, right? Some guy that returned for many years. He's sitting on his couch. You could call upon him. I mean, it's been eliminated
Yeah.
from the sport
Yeah,
basically.
I think Kenny McIntosh might have done it in Georgia, but that might have just been kicks. And honestly, DJ's not really a problem on kicks. I don't have a problem with him doing kick returns. He's pretty good at that. It's the punt returns where it's just killing me. It's really like between the fumbles and letting the ball touch the ground and now whatever it was he did against Tennessee, like that's where the problem is. And the ideal would be Eskridge, but I guess Eskridge is going to have the longest rib injury in NFL history here and just never get back. So,
I got a theory on that one though too. I think that they're trying to make sure he stays healthy at the end of the year so he clears the physical at the end of the season because then you can start to save $1.4 million by moving off of Eskridge after this year. But if he's
yeah.
injured, of course, then you get that situation like Monet this offseason where Monet was injured this offseason, still remains injured. You couldn't release him this offseason because he was in an injured state. He wasn't going to pass a physical. So I think that's what they're doing is they're just like, keep him protected. We're done on this one.
Mhm.
But that still comes down to the bottom line here, Cameron, is that there's not any other options you're going to go to. And we're just going to have to hope he can, I guess, hang in there. I really wish we could just go back to Locke and have him fair catch the ball almost, but Locke didn't look comfortable doing it last year when you had him back there anymore. So I just comes back to like, I guess we're stuck here on this one at this point.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? But thank you, Cameron. Appreciate you. They've started to legislate out those punt returners, kick returners in the game, and so now there's not as many of those guys that have just retired that are just sitting there. It's a waning position in the NFL. We'll see if they start to ever bring it back with some of these rule changes, but that's where it's at right now and where it continues to trend towards. Defensively speaking, great to see Boye Mafe. Let's get and look at this defensive line, which I think definitely did, outside of stopping the run, Brendan, in this game, carried the day on their side of it with creating the pressures. Boye Mafe gave you one of those games of like what he was giving you early in the year when he had 7 straight games with a sack, 2 sacks in this one, 5-6 tackles, tackle for loss. He really felt more everywhere like he was earlier on in the year in this game. Great to see him get back off the schneid, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to be doing a bit of a video on Mafe soon. I was collecting some data. Um, I was looking at all edge rushers or even part-time edge rushers, guys like the bigger guys like Keon White. I was looking at all those guys that had been drafted in day 2 of the draft over the last 4 years to see how they've done in like that first year versus that second year. And Mafe has more sacks than any of them in their second year that I've been able to find so far.
Mm-mm.
He's got 9. The only guy who has him beat, arguably, is Darrell Taylor, and that's if you actually give Darrell Taylor credit for his rookie year being his first year where he actually played, because remember, he missed all of 2020. But if Mafe gets one more sack, he's the only one to get to double digits in that second year. Like there are guys like Nick Benito who got to 7 sacks. There are guys like Jonathan Greenard actually got to 8 sacks. Alex Highsmith got to 6 sacks. So He is actually on a little bit of a track here to be the most impressive day two edge of the last 4 drafts, I think.
Dang.
And that's something because there are definitely some big names in this collection of guys like Ebiketie, who actually went a little ahead of Mafe. There are guys like Ojulari. Both Ojularis actually were day two edge picks. And I don't know what's going on with the Aziz Ojulari, but he's barely playing this year. I don't know if he's hurt or not.
Yeah. He was, remember, he was like 21. So I think with them, they just don't feel comfortable putting him out there because he was going to
Yeah.
take a little more time to kind of
Yeah,
figure out what there.
Epinenza didn't really break out until year 3. Uche didn't really break out until year 3. So, Malcolm Kuntz on the Raiders, he broke out in year 3. The Colts have a guy, Deo Ode Hingbo, I think his name is.
You're usually really good at those names too. I can't even try that one. I butcher it every single time.
Yeah, but yeah, Mafe is the best of them all. It looks like he's the only one. Like him and maybe Ebiketie are the only guys in the last 4 years who are going to get to double-digit sacks in their second season. And Ebiketie's going to have to go crazy these next 2 games to get there. Boy just needs one.
Yeah, he is. It's really great to see what he's done on this defense this year, taking that steps forward, and hopefully next year we can get both him and Uchenna going a whole year. So we feel really good about where we're at with our front line guys out there and able to because I think both those guys can be impactful off the edge and what they're bringing. Not star level, maybe Mafe's got some star level to him, but at least impactful to where you can't target him, you can't go at that spot. And what's great about him, Brennan, is he both rushes the passer and he plays the run. He does them sort of equally well now, almost. I don't know if his pass rush game has quite got to where his run defense was, but it's close. And the future is looking bright for Boye. A guy who was the highest rated by PFF for defense for us in this game coming into it, who added another game that I thought continues to validate that trade, even though I know people are, it's a rental, he's been a monster for us, and that's Leonard Williams. Absolutely had another game for us out there in this one, didn't he?
Yeah, he brings it. He's brought it pretty much every week since he got here, I feel like. Maybe not the first game, but that was the first game after a trade. Like, who really cares about that? And that was the Ravens game. Nothing was going to happen in that game that would have saved us. Like,
No.
he could have been Lawrence Taylor, and we still wouldn't have won that game. So I don't even care about that, really. Yeah, he's been very, very good ever since he got here, and it's a true mystery that this defense can add an excellent player like him and get worse. Like, I'm gonna spend some time this offseason trying to figure that one out, and I don't think I'm gonna find the answer. But yeah, we're gonna have a little bit of a decision to make this offseason, I think, because on the one hand, he's an excellent player who's going to be worth a lot of money, but and we'll talk more about this when the offseason hits. Why would I want to give a ton of money to a defensive player when it seems like the players on defense don't even matter? They don't actually affect how good this defense is. But he is definitely, I mean, I know he didn't have a sack in this game. Of the 6 sacks we had, he actually didn't have any of them, but he was still very, very good out there. And if we do decide to keep him around next year at a very high cost, like we're probably looking at 20 million a year as the low at this point. I feel like I think it was like 3 years, 60. I would guess is like the contract.
Maybe
That's only a little. That's only a little more than we gave Dre'Mont Jones, and Leonard Williams is definitely better than Dre'Mont
he's
Jones.
30 years old though. The difference
Yeah,
is going
but
at your prime versus being at the end of your prime. And like, there's only 2 contracts I can think of. Well, there's one contract I can think of a 30-year-old guy getting paid recently on the defensive tackle position at that kind of money. And that's Ndamukong Suh. But can you name for me? We can, of course, you and I have gone through the list of guys over the last year that have been paid on the defensive tackle position. They're all young guys coming out of their rookie contract. None of them are
Aaron
even.
Donald.
Well, that's what I just said. Aaron Donald's the only guy that
Oh, you said Sue, and I was like, wait a minute.
My
Sue?
bad. No, I meant Aaron Donald. Sorry. Yeah, I meant Aaron Donald.
Okay.
So Aaron Donald, and then you had even the Chiefs this last year, for instance, with Jones. You bring him back on an accommodation, but he's still due to, I believe, be a free agent this offseason. So there's a certain hesitant. Am I wrong? I mean, let me give you a chance to answer. Sorry. And is there one you can think of that's been paid?
I mean, I can't, but also the cap is going up. So the standards for what constitutes getting paid is changing every offseason. And with the way he's playing right now, I don't think his age is going to affect what he can ask for all that much.
It may not. You may not be. You may be right on that. To me, it feels more like 15 is kind of the spot. So that'd be more my difference of it would be is I think that the age factors in that spot. If we're talking about him rolling into his prime, then maybe he's at the 22, 23 million, from where he's at from performance. But at the age that you take with that risk and the fact that most teams aren't, I don't know if there'll be a lot of teams lining up to necessarily throw 20 million at him, but you got to keep him in my opinion. And you mentioned, I got a couple of reasons I think I can provide you for why the backtrack has happened. You've had a regression with Jaren's fighting his ass off, but he played too many snaps. He wore down. You and I both agree on that. And I don't think he's giving you the same level of performance he did early in the year, nor is Mario Edwards Jr. And that's with some of your edge play eroding with Derek Hall, Darrell Taylor, and Frank Clark taking up Uchenna's snaps, and they also are not playing as well. The other thing that happened at the same point in time of this is you went through some pretty good offenses. The Niners twice, the Baltimore Ravens, the Dallas Cowboys. When Leonard came aboard was right about the time you're having to play these really, really top-notch NFL offenses, some of the best of the bunch, in fact. And that meant that those weaker parts were going to get more exposed, but that had nothing to do with Leonard Williams to me at that point. That had nothing to do with him not, out there doing what he needs to be doing. And I think you got to sign him, Brendan. I think this wasn't a one-person thing. Leonard wasn't brought in to be the centerpiece defensive tackle thing. It was an acknowledgement of, hey, we're light here. You and I talked about it. The fans have talked about throughout the whole offseason. It's the part that you talk also about. We got to be frustrated with the front office because fans across the board said, hey, the defensive tackle position. Yeah. Why are we ignoring that? Why aren't we doing anything? We couldn't stop the run last year, and your guys' offseason plan is Mario Edwards Jr., Jaron Reed, and Cam Young, and Mike Morris.
Dre'mont. I know Dre'mont plays outside now, but at the time that was not the plan.
Even in Draymond's case, you draft him as a guy, you sign him as a guy to give you a pass rush on the inside. He wasn't really much of a run defender on the inside in what you're bringing. He was average.
Yeah, but there's a trickle-down effect where he plays snaps, takes snaps away from the run defenders, allows them to rest more.
That's valid.
There is a trickle-down effect. But, I mean, we knew. The team definitely knew. Remember, they tried to sign Zach Allen and Dre'Mont Jones, and then they got outbid for Zach Allen by a pretty small margin. So they knew they had a need there. It's just very weird they didn't decide to fill that need after they missed out on Zach Allen until they got to basically the Mario Edwards Jr. level of player. And I mean, if the right player isn't there, then the right player isn't there. But I'm pretty sure there were some right players there that you maybe could have gotten. I don't remember all the names of guys who were available in 2020 in the 2023 free agency class, but there was probably somebody out there who would have been better than Mario Edwards. No hate to Mario Edwards. He's been
fine. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. No, I think that's a fair way of putting it. So we'll see what they do this offseason with it, Brendan. But I would like to see him brought back. I think he's absolutely added to this defense. And what we needed. God, if we didn't have him, Brendan, can you imagine what would happen if he wasn't here through this time and where some of these games? I think that he's definitely probably at least helped us in one game to get a win that we wouldn't have had otherwise on this stretch. Jaron Reed got another sack in this game. Again, like I said, I think he is wearing down this year, and there are some times where he gets pushed back where it isn't all good. But it's been a great signing. It was a great value signing for what he has been asked to be brought in here to do. And I think he played the scores don't bear this out well with him because he was probably at the heart of some of the run. But again, what do you want the guy to do? Like I think PFF on those combo blocks where they get the two guys hitting them, I think they could give the defensive tackle like the negative grade on that. And it's like, well, what's the guy got to do? He's getting waylaid by two blockers. You can only hold so much ground.
Yeah. And in fairness, I will say this, the run defense takes a hit when we don't have Witherspoon, and then you lose Brooks midway through. I think both those guys are key parts of our run defense. And I say that as somebody that is not a huge fan of Jordan Brooks. I do think he's added some value this year that I don't believe he's added in previous seasons.
Yeah, I think he's taken some step, at least a partial step forward this year. It's not a huge step forward, but at least it's been an improvement from where it's been for most of his time here. How'd you think Devin Bush held up on the inside?
Yeah, he played okay. Not the best, not the worst. I think there's a lot of incompetency on this defense. I'm not going to expect Devin Bush to go out there and be able to swim out of all that. So nothing stand out to me, but I thought he played okay. About what you would expect for a backup level player, which he is right now.
Yeah. I thought also Derek Hall gave some flashes in this game more than what he's
Yeah,
provided too. He had
yeah,
some spots I thought in this game where he gave you just a little bit that was like, oh, he's been missing. Now he's kind of give us a little nine. Not a great game, but just hey, a little bit of something. A little bit of something.
yeah. That's the other reason why I wanted to look at these day two edge players actually to compare it to what Derek Hall's giving us. And I mean, he doesn't hold up that well in the comparison, but the point is that a vast majority of second round and third round edge rushers do not do much their rookie year. It's like this year we actually have a couple because Diaby on Tampa Bay is good.
Mhm,
Uh Tupelo O2 on the Chargers has been good.
mhm.
Byron Young on the Rams has been good, but most years it's like, okay, there might be one guy who stands out, like Ojulari 2 years ago,
Yeah.
but it's very rare for a guy to be a standout player as a rookie when they're a second or third round edge player.
It speaks to how deep this draft was with the edge class, right? Too. That's
Hmm.
part of that as well as this was a
Right.
unique draft for the edges. So you just had a little more strength to get it done with it. But it's hard. I think edge is one of those positions that takes a long time to learn, and it's very unless you have truly elite traits, it's very hard to flash when you first burst on the scene. You need to not only learn your pass rush moves, you need to learn how to set up the offensive lineman to how to chain pass rush moves together. How do you play the run? Are you able to? Do you have the prerequisite strength to hold up with that? There's a lot that you could probably have to kind of like bricks build up in your game before you finally get to a place where you are the player the team envisioned when they drafted you.
Mhm.
Garth Knight asks, got a Mariner question here for us. Thank you for the fiver, Garth. And it's good to see you in the house tonight. Says, did you guys see the M's got catcher and DH Mitch Garver? I'm re-upping on the Comcast high tier after that news.
Yeah, it's a good
Woo!
signing. It is.
Yeah, I guess.
Nothing wrong with it. In a vacuum, there's nothing wrong with it. It's kind of like a couple years ago when the Seahawks in free agency would sign like Benson Mayoa for 2.5 million. You're like, okay, that signing's good, but what do
Centerpiece
you?
of your free agency, though.
Yeah, like you got to bring something a little more powerful so that this signing is meaningful. Bringing in Benson Mayo on a cheap deal is great, but it's not really meaningful if you decide, okay, we're good now. We're not good now. Or guys like what was the guy's name? Kerry Hyder on a vet min deal. It's like that's great. He's totally worth veteran minimum. I love it.
Yeah.
But now what? Now what are you doing? And the answer was usually nothing. So, I already kind of drew my line in the sand here. If the Mariners' payroll is less than 130 million when the season starts, I'm not watching and I'm not covering them. But if they do go over 130 million, I'll at least watch them and cover them because at that point it's like, okay, our payroll went up. I can respect that at least a little bit.
Mhm.
But this move by itself does not get us close to that $130 million mark.
Yeah, it for me, Garth doesn't do much to. I just don't think it moves the needle for me at all. He hits 270 last year with 19 home runs in Texas, a very hitter friendly park. Now he's going to go to one of the most unhitter friendly parks, if not the most unhitter friendly park in the entire Major League Baseball. And what that's taught me over the years is that if you're heading from a hitter's park, you're going to lose probably 10 to 15 points off your batting average, and you're going to probably lose about 5, 6, 7 ding dongs a year if you hit 20 the year before out there in Texas. So we got a guy that hits 255 and is going to knock out 13 home runs. Well, whoopity do. He strikes out a little less than what we've had at the DH position recently. Whoopity do. I like that he provides a little bit of blow, I guess, there for our catcher, who's had sometimes just play too much, but Raleigh, but Mariners are generating no excitement for this upcoming season. And it's sad because right now they should be absolutely able to jump forward in this city and be the sort of main course in town with the young talent that they have put together, with the pitching
Yeah.
staff that they have put together, but they've completely pulled the pin out of the balloon. And it sucks to see. It sucks to see, especially as a lifelong Mariner fan that's just been down this road so many different times.
Yeah, I think that hitters really hate coming here. I think hitters really hate coming
Yep.
here. And that, so when you sign a hitter in free agency, you're like, wow, that's exciting because we never do that. That's why we always have to trade for them, right? We
Yep.
always have to trade for these hitters because they don't want to come here of their own free will. But I got to believe there's something you could do to make it a little bit better than what it is. Right now, we still Like, our outfield is still a disaster right now. Like, we have nothing out there except Julio, and it's getting kind of late to do anything about that, right? Like, you're running out of opportunities to do anything about that. So I don't know. We'll see what happens in the next few weeks, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. They signaled the white flag pretty early on this offseason about what they were going to do. So this isn't the biggest of surprise. It's gone down this, not even bearing in mind their track record. This is what they showed you they're going to do. But they don't have you can't come to me as a fan and be like, okay, watch every game now. We're not going to do everything we could be doing as an ownership, but you need to give all for the team. You need to spend your money in our stadium. You need to watch on the TV all the time. It seems a kind of a bit of a disbalance there is on what each party is sort of trying to bring to the table. Snail, thank you for the $2 donation. He asks, is Derek Hall getting healthy, and is he getting more snaps right now?
He's not really getting snaps.
He only had 11 snaps this past game, Snail. So that's right in line with where he's been. 8 to 13 snaps a game is about where I think he's been recently.
Yeah, the thing about this that is weird is that he was playing a lot of snaps early in the year when we had Nwosu. Yeah. And after losing Nwosu, his snap counts have only gone down. I don't get it.
I don't either. I keep coming back to Snail wondering about the shoulder. Really, is it healthy or not? And we don't know for sure where with that one, but it would at least be an explanation, because at least with Mafe last year, okay, he wasn't giving you a pass rush, but you were giving him snaps to get him out there. Now, I will say Mafe played much better for you when he was on the field.
Oh, yeah.
But there was a lot of times, too, where in pass rush, he wasn't getting you much as far as pressures or hits or sacks go. He was learning his way, finding his way last year with that. But we'll find out on that sooner or later, Snail, on what's going on with Derek for sure. But he did, at least in this game, he supplied a pressure. I think he was in there also in the running game in the backfield. I think he had a TFL. So at least on those 11 snaps, doing something, because last where you've been giving him small snaps, he's done nothing for you in recent here memory.
Right.
Thank you, Snail. Appreciate you. Jordan, great to see you in the house as well. Thank you for the $5 donation. Says hitters should look at T-Mobile Park in the viewpoint of, if you can hit here, you can hit anywhere. Maybe they aren't built like that.
Yeah, I don't think they really look at it like that. They're trying to get paid. They want to play in Colorado and go make a bunch of money.
Yeah, I think even if you had that viewpoint as a hitter, that personal pride to be that way, Jordan, the problem is that the people that you end up negotiating with will use that against you. Well, you only got 20 home runs last year, and but I'm in a ballpark that reduces that down. So no, we don't take that into account. Yeah, but if I'm in your stadium, then I'll hit much better, though. That doesn't really probably resonate, I imagine, with general managers during negotiations for that. So the players kind of got to get, every last thing they can get. And the thing with it is that, Jordan, I feel like it's one thing if you're talking about going into kind of a general pitcher's park or fairly pitcher-friendly park. It's another thing to me, and Brendan, tell me if you don't agree with this, you're playing in the most pitcher-friendly ballpark in entire Major League Baseball, and maybe by even a wide margin. Maybe not even where it's even like kind of close with second place on that.
Yeah. I mean, the marine layer is killer. I know it's kind of a meme, but it's also a thing. It's real.
Yeah, it is real. And we've seen it for so many years there. And there's nothing worse, I think, for Jordan first, but you get a power hitter who comes in there and he barrels up a ball. He sends that ball out. And for the last, since he's gone back for 10 years, when he hits a ball like that, it goes out of the park and you watch it go die right at the front of the warning track out there in left field. It probably gets hard to just think, well, I'll overcome that. I'll just be mentally stronger than that on this one. It's like, look, I just hit that with everything I had and it just died. That always goes over the fence. And every park I've ever played in, that goes over the fence.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my kind of look on it, Jordan. Thank you, though. Appreciate you. Let's slide on over here to the offensive side of the ball here, Brendan, in a game where I felt like in the first half it was pretty miserable and there wasn't a lot to be had. I thought Waldron didn't get much done in that first half as far as creativeness or the way he was looking to employ things. The first drive, he was kind of getting some of the short passing game working, but then it just it got weird. We love to do the second down and long run plays. Man, do we love that.
A lot of that.
And then you've also got Gino just looking like he had a lot of rust on him for 2 weeks being gone and maybe not at the full health, but they turned around the second half, didn't they?
Yeah, they scored every time they had the ball in the second half.
That's not too shabby. So
that's hard to do. Now they only had the ball 3 times because that game had a weird flow to it. Mm-hmm. But overall, I came out of this game pretty happy with the results of the offense. I think scoring 20 points on 7 drives is perfectly good. I think that's actually I think that would actually rank among the highest offenses in the league. Now, getting dominated at the line of scrimmage by Tennessee's backup defense is bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, offhand, I think Anthony Bradford has reached the point where he's just unplayable. And if Phil Haynes is good to go, we need to get him back in there ASAP. Like
Mhm.
I know Phil Haynes wasn't very good, but he is much better than Bradford has been for like I want to say the last 3 weeks,
Yeah.
where he's looked like somebody who does not belong in the NFL. And again, I'm high on Bradford going forward. If you want
Yeah.
to start him next year or the year after, that's fine. But he's clearly not ready. And he has been a huge anchor on this offense, I think. Not to let the other guys off the hook either on the interior offensive line. That to me was the one thing that really bugged me in this game. They don't have Jeffrey Simmons. They don't have one of their starting linebackers. And you still can't really run the ball on them. K9 had like 2 long carries, and then everything else was nothing. Nothing
Yeah.
going on. Um, there's more stuff from this game where it feels like we're not fooling anybody. Like that play near the goal line where we ran like a backwards pass to K9, I think it was. Do you remember the play?
Yeah.
Where I think we were at our own 4-yard line and there's 30 Titans defenders right there. Like they know it was coming and they're just waiting for it. The handoff to Charbonnet on 2nd and goal from the 2-yard line where he's immediately just swarmed because everybody knew it was coming. The shotgun draw to Charbonnet where he loses 3
And
yards.
you leave the strong side play edge unblocked on that. I try to understand that one too, because Charbonnet's here, the edge is right here, Brennan, right? So it's not like the edge has to come across the formation to get to Charbonnet. He just has to take 3 steps to Charbonnet to get to him and have a direct path because he's unblocked. And you
Right.
just leave him. I couldn't figure that one out.
Yeah, it feels like something that we called without actually thinking about it at all. We just called it because that's what we're doing, and that's all
Yeah.
there is to it. Little things like that still get on my nerves. But the big picture is that I am aware of the fact that most NFL games are won in the fourth quarter. They are. I know it's a meme in Seattle because of the Pete Carroll quote, but most games in the NFL are close, and most games in the NFL do come down to the fourth quarter. So when you have your offense going down for 2 very long touchdown drives in that fourth quarter, the big picture is going to be very positive, I think. And I came away from that game feeling like this offense has at least a chance to get going into the playoffs to where they could go into a place like Detroit or Dallas or Philadelphia and at the very least do their job.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that they do, especially with having now maybe Lucas getting back into his flow across. I know they didn't have a well-rated game. To your point, you look across the PFF ratings for the line, and it was pretty poor across the board, and especially in the run blocking. It's brutal at times because they're getting penetration, and then there's no around the hole, and then the hole's closed up as well. These backs just have nowhere to go. And Walker did some amazing work to get what he could at times. It seems like we say that every week, but man, it's just true. He pulls off some of the most magical runs that aren't the biggest gains. Sometimes they are, that are him basically doing it all on his own. To quote back in the day, Dick Vermeil, like, we didn't block anybody on that play for you, Marshall. And that's pretty much how I felt at times there in this game, watching Walker at times where he's making it happen. You talk about the coming back into the fourth quarter, Geno Smith. We can finally, I think, firmly now put this one to bed, can't we? That was the narrative that you and I both heard a bunch about when Geno was being elevated to the starter. That one of the reasons why Geno is not the guy, according to these naysayers of Geno, was the fact that he couldn't bring you back in the game. As you said, so many games, they would tell you all these games come down the line, all these games come down to a fourth quarter drive. And when that happens, you will see that that's when Geno shrinks to his smallest. But indeed this year, and I'd say indeed over the last 2 years and what he's shown us, that has not been the case. He has been absolutely awesome in these fourth quarter comebacks.
Yeah, and a couple of these games, he has to do it twice in one game. He has to lead us on a score to take the lead, and then we give it back, and then he has to go do it again. So there's some NFL records that he could be breaking in the coming couple weeks here. I think he is tied for the all-time lead in touchdown passes in the fourth
You read my
quarter.
mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
you read my mind. Those 2 go-ahead touchdown passes give Smith 6 this season in the fourth quarter or overtime. According to the Elias Sports Bureau, that's tied for the most in a season in NFL history.
Mhm.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, and also 3 touchdowns in the last minute of a game to take the lead, I think, which is also, I mean, that one I don't really put as much stock into. That one is kinda more like a trivia than it is indicative of anything great, but the 4th quarter touchdowns to take the lead, that's pretty big,
Mm.
and let's not forget, he did kinda give us a game-winning drive against the Rams. Myers just missed the kick, and I know, Gino could have gotten us closer, but his arm also didn't work on that drive. So I'm gonna definitely take what I can get in a situation like that.
Yeah. No, it's another drive he got us in and did it through, and, he had a couple last year. The fact he's doing getting you the touchdown, so, it's one thing to go down and get you the field goal attempts. Another thing is, "No, kicker, you stay on the sideline. I got this. I'm gonna take
Mhm,
care of this, right here." And
mhm.
again, as I was talking about Walker or some of these things, it really offensively, Brendan, it sort of played true across the board, how it's played out all across the board in the offense this year. Even then, them finding some success at the end, the struggles in the running game, also the forgetting that you had DK Metcalf on your team through, it seems like, most of this game down to the third quarter again, where you have 2 quarters, you just don't forget, and then you start to go to him, and it turns out to be remarkably effective when you did. He had another, I thought, damn fine game out there in this one, Brendan, including one of the better catches that we've seen on the season, a high degree of difficulty catch that he pulled in and reeled in. And back-to-back weeks, he's just been money when you really, really need him to be so.
Yeah, yeah. You're talking about the 3rd and 14? Are you talking about the?
The touchdown catch in the back with the one arm, where he
Oh,
catches the one arm in the back of the end zone, and then
oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Very nice. Yeah. Did you see Vrabel when they asked him about that play?
mm-mm.
They asked him, "Did the referees make a call on the Metcalf cat touchdown?" And he was like, "No, they just stood there." Because that's what it looked like on TV, right? It looks like the referees, they didn't signal incomplete, they didn't signal touchdown, they just stood there. So I thought maybe the cameras missed it. So then they asked Vrabel, "What did you see?" And he's like, "No, the referee just stood there." Um, you know,
Well, hey, sometimes they get an awe too, right, Brendan? Sometimes the officials get like,
yeah.
it amazes even them, and that's a hell of a play, guys. Probably should have flag called. He's got his arm being pulled back. He has to tip the ball up till he can get his arm back into it, then drags the toe. Just a great,
Hmm.
great reception, and but he also made some big catches down the line in that game, and he drew the flag down there by the end zone there to get
Yep.
to get
Big
to the
one.
deal, and he's drawn a few of those. Those are ones that we'll eventually have to kind of look. I'd be interested to see where he stands on how many flags he does end up drawing
Yeah.
through over the course of the season, because he gets you a lot of yards that doesn't count on his final stats, but that got you up the field on some of those flags.
Yeah. Lockett's really good at. I remember there was a couple years, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, Lockett led the league in yards drawn on pass interference. He's gotten pretty good at the flopping thing. If this was the NBA, he'd be getting a lot of fines.
Oh, he's got a lot of soccer to him, yeah.
Yeah.
Ty's got a lot of soccer in that with what he does on that. And hey, if it works, it works. He's good at it. Like you say, he's got it. You get it down, you get it down. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Jeffrey Thistle says, calm down. Gino played no better than Locke.
Okay.
Uh, Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, Jeffrey, you're definitely touching on a subject that both for me and people were bristling at me last week about our discussion about having the talk on Locke. And I know Locke's got, I mean, it's weird. The people, there's the share,
Yeah.
the,
I don't get it. I don't get it.
yeah, I don't either. Because people come out to me and they say, "Well, Locke was so much more decisive last week. Locke was, willing to trust his throws in there." It's like he threw for 4.5 yards an attempt through 3 quarters. Like the offensive coordinator in Waldron kept Locke in a box and protected him through 3 quarters. And when they let him rip, he let him rip, and he did a good job. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any shade to throw at Locke. As both Brendan and me have said with this, Jeffrey, we do see Gino and Locke very close to each other as far as their ability and what they bring to the table. Both me and Brendan agree, though, also that Gino's a little bit better than him. In that little bit of better, I don't understand why it's got to be overstated past that. It's just a little bit better. That's all it is. It's just he's a little bit better. He's a little less turnover prone. That doesn't mean that then I'm going to overstate it to mean that Locke's trash and he can't do nothing. quite the opposite. They've gotten two quality quarterbacks here that are doing what they're doing. Are they the answer to the future? Is Geno the answer to the future? It's not to say that either. It's just to say, look, Geno's had a great game, Jeffrey. And as we just provided you, those are statistics that are all-time statistics for quarterbacks in NFL history. And I think it's also very pertinent because of the fact that I got screamed at up and down when I tried to support Geno as he was taking over the starting role that he couldn't bring you from behind. And yet he's shown over and over again that he can do that. Did Locke do it last week as well? Sure. But so Geno has as well. And it's not that we don't have to do, one doesn't have to come at the cost of the other. We can just sometimes say this thing's a good thing and that thing's a good thing, And I think that's where more I stand with it.
Yeah. I mean, for 58 minutes, we treated the game plan treated Locke like it was Tim Tebow. Like there was very little difference between what we did with Drew Lock in the first 58 minutes of that game and what Denver did with Tim Tebow back in 2011. It was like that alone makes Geno pretty clearly better than Locke because we can run a real offense when we have Geno Smith out there. At least we can run an offense that looks like it's from the modern NFL. Even if it's not great, it's still really good. And I mean, well, maybe not really good, but I would still say good given the fact that we have a bottom 3 offensive line in pass protection. But
Another thing that Locke had that Geno didn't in this, Geno had no running game in this one to lean back on. One thing Locke did have through that portion of the game with the Eagles was 11 straight rushing attempts at one point in the game and a ground game that was actually working for him in that game.
Yeah, that's true. Here's how I would put it. Geno Smith and Drew Lock might be the same person at different points in their life, right? Mm-hmm. Like Geno Smith and Drew Lock are the same guy. It's just that Geno Smith has had the opportunity to sit behind Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, and Russell Wilson for years, and Drew Lock hasn't had any of that. Maybe that's the difference between the two. But I mean, Drew Lock, that it's not happening right now. You're not sending Drew Lock to, QB school to get educated by all those Hall of Famers this offseason. So if he maybe 5 years from now, he can do what Geno's doing right now. But that's 5 years from now. That's a possibility.
Yeah, I agree with it. And so I get where you're coming from, Jeffrey. I do. And it's just, I do see them both very close to each other, just Geno a little bit ahead. And it's really in one specific area, the turnover, which to Brendan's point, why did they put him in kind of the Tebow-like offense at first? Why'd they kind of protect him? Because they were worried about the turnovers on the road there or at home there against an Eagles team. They wanted to make sure that he had those limited because they haven't been limited when he had started prior or in those times that he had played prior. John M. Thank you, Jeffrey, for the dono. John, and it's good to see you now too, brother. John, thank you for the $10 donation, John. Very kind of you. He says, I know it's for a different show, but what do you guys think about the Steelers at home? My uncle's a big Steelers fan and going to the game. Hope we crush them. Well, thank you, John, for that $10 donation. And we'll definitely be doing a full preview show on Thursday at 8 o'clock here, diving into it. But certainly we can do a little bit of a preview right now. What do you think about this game at home?
I'm excited to play Rudolph. I think that's preferable. I know it's close, and I know neither guy's very good, but Tomlin did announce earlier today that Rudolph's the starter, which I like. I think that's a little bit better, and I'll take any edge that I can get. And I do think it's an edge. I know some people will disagree, but I like that. Don't really like having to deal with that pass rush. So it'll probably be another low-scoring game, and hopefully we win it at the end. That's usually what we do.
Yeah, probably a low-scoring game. I'm definitely worried about the pass rush, John. I'm definitely worried about the fact the Steelers are going to want to run the ball if they can, and we've had some issues in stopping the run recently, and so we could end up making it a little bit easy for the Steelers to, let them off the hook, where Steelers, you want to try to force them to pass. You really feel like, okay, if they start make them pass heavy, that's where we got them versus letting them just lean in the ground game, shorten the game up, protect their defense. You want to get out of that. And that's going to come with offensive success early on that forces the Steelers to actually feel like they have to go out there to me and score. And that's what would drive you to victory. If they can keep it super low scoring and really dirty this up Pittsburgh style, then you could be in some trouble at that point if they can keep that defense fresh on you and really get after it. But we're going to have to pass protect in this game really well. And just find some productivity early on in this game because I don't think we can play the game we played this last week against this Steelers team. They're in much better shape. They're not a prime prime whatever, but they'll. I think they would take that if we gave the kind of game we did this last week to them at home. They I think can take us on that. So we're gonna have to give a little bit more than we did this last week to pull this one off.
Yeah.
Where do you stand with it?
I feel pretty good about it. At home against a bad quarterback, and the crowd should be pretty into it because the team actually has something to play for right now.
Good point. Yeah.
I feel good about it.
And as crowd's shown a couple times this year, there's been a little bit of a revitalization of the 12s in that stadium. There's been a couple of games in particular that seems like they've really been able to bring it and actually bring back a little bit more to the forefront that built-in advantage of when that house is rocking, don't come a knocking. And it's been times in recent years where it's gotten a little silent at times. So hopefully that can be the case, and we don't have to see too much black and yellow when they do the pan shot across the stadium. I would like that.
Right.
Thank you, though, John. We'll be definitely doing a deep preview this upcoming Thursday, though. But
that's right.
Yeah, I think we can actually win it. We can absolutely win it. But it's going to really be dependent on us running a certain, to me, game style of finding some balance offensively and finding some productivity early on rather than punting away 2 quarters. You're going to have to kind of, not that you have to score 30 on Steelers to win this game, but you probably got to put up 24, right, Brendan? You're going to have to probably put up at least over 20 to get this done.
I don't know.
No?
I don't know. I think Rudolph could have a really bad game in him. I mean, he's coming off the best game of his career. He's due, right?
Maybe, or he's getting hot. One of the
two. And I think we're getting Witherspoon back, which is significant.
That is significant. That's huge coming back. Burns has been playing really well down there, but like you talked about with Kobe Bryant, if you flopped out Burns at times to have him in there, that's a big drop from what you have there with Witherspoon rocking it on that side of things. Long live the king. Thank you for the $5 donation. He says, after this weekend, we may be able to control our destiny on who we play in the wild card. Would you guys oppose losing a game to avoid first round versus the Niners?
No, I don't think I would oppose that. Like, that's the team that I don't really want to deal with because I don't think at this point I can only assume that Carroll just has no idea how to handle that team. Like the Ravens showed last night, there are things you can do against that Niners team that do work. And I just think we're completely unwilling to do those things. So I can't sign off on playing the Niners in the playoffs because unless like a bunch of players get hurt, that's where it would end. I definitely want to play the Lions, who we already beat, the Eagles, who we already beat, and the Cowboys, who we gave a really good game to, over the Niners. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me too, Long Live the King, if we clinch it and we have the wild card after this week, my opinion is that you've got to treat the next week like a bye. In that you had an early bye in this season. You've got plenty of guys, I'm sure, like Bobby and the like, that are super tired who could use the extra week off, and then sort of resting those guys with having John Radigan start for you at middle linebacker. Does that then allow you to lose the game probably in that final game, potentially then to the Cardinals? Well, then, that'd be perfectly fine at that point. I don't know if I'd do it just purposely not to avoid the Niners, but like Brendan said, I don't want to play them right now. And not just because that they're so much better and talented, but like Brendan said, we don't necessarily do the things we need to do to take down the Niners, like what Baltimore did. I mean, watching them, Brendan, last night, squeezing down on the routes that were short into the middle of the field, especially on that Niner team, not just saying, Brock, you're not going to have those today. You're going to have to hit us outside the numbers to get us. And I love their approach from that standpoint of things. And boy, Brendan, there's a part of me as we look at the Niners going forward that makes me feel like, man, we've really got to make a running quarterback at the forefront, whoever the next quarterback is, his ability to use his legs, because that seems to be something that gives this Niner defense so much trouble, and not necessarily something we have right now. We got 2 guys that have legs, but they don't like to use them. Neither Geno nor Drew actually like to really scramble and run.
Yeah, and I feel like our coaching staff doesn't really want them to use them that much.
That's a good point. Could be that as much, with it as well. Yeah. So I'm in favor of it, but I'm more just one long live, rest the guys, get them juiced up. If we happen to do it, it'd be great to be able to get that win this week and be able to have then the final game of the season where we can kind of have that de facto bye, because that just sets you up all the much better to be able to then go on the road and go get that W after that point.
Right.
Thank you, King. Appreciate you. Jeffrey Thistle with another $2 donation says Rudolph the pick 6 reindeer. Oh, his nose is bright red, but that's only because of his coke habit.
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten a pretty extended look at Mason Rudolph before. He played a lot of games in 2019, and he's a backup quarterback. So there's no real upside there. At least with Kenny Pickett, I feel like there's a little upside, even if most games he doesn't really realize it.
I was checking back on the box score, Brendan, and because I don't know if you remember this, but we knocked out Big Ben
Oh yeah,
in
I
the last
remember.
game we played that. And so the last game we played, Mason Rudolph was 12 of 19 for 112 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So Steelers ran the ball in us well last time, 5.1 yard per carry average, though only 16 attempts. Oh,
Yeah.
wait. Well, that was one big run. We did a good job of stopping the run. It was one big 23-yard run that got us last time against them.
Yeah, I think they scored both touchdowns off of Chris Carson fumbles that gave them the ball inside like
Ah,
the 10 or something, if I'm recalling correctly. And the interception was a ball that bounced off Sidney Moncrief's hands and went right to McDougald.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that looks like fumble
that was
Russell, fumble Chris.
yeah,
Both
that
lost.
was yeah, that was also a game where um what was that? I was like, yeah, that was the game where we knocked out Ben. And I think Carson lost 2 fumbles in that game, if I recall correctly, and it was in
Just
Pittsburgh
one.
too.
Just one, but Russell lost the other one. And yeah, it was in
Might have been
Pittsburgh.
on an bad exchange then where they gave it to Russell, but it was actually Carson's fault. I'm not sure, but I feel like I remember Carson had 2 really bad plays in that game.
The play I remember on the Carson fumble one was it was one of the Carson fumbles that, and he had in his career. And it was a bit of an issue at times with him, but it was the one that I looked at with him that I went, that's not his fault, because we did the magical leave the edge player unblocked and TJ Watt, and Watt just comes down like this last week in this last game and lights Carson up where he never sees it coming. Just
Mm,
unblocked defender running full speed at Carson before he's even gotten to the hole. You just go, what is the guy supposed to do? You know what I
mm.
mean? But I will say this with Rudolph, he will not try to overextend himself. He'll take what we're going to give him, and if we give him some, if we leave up in those open routes, sometimes like we will allow short and opened up, he's going to be able to take advantage. But he's a backup too, for a reason to your point, Jeffrey. So I like the
I
pick six.
I miss, Duck Hodges personally.
I do too. I was a big Doug Hodges. Rudolph, no way, no way. Hodges, yes.
Yes, that
Give me
was
the
way
give me
better.
the duck. Give me the duck.
Yeah.
But I hope you're right, Jeffrey. You will be the psychic of the week this week if Witherspoon in a pick six comes back onto the field. That feels right. That feels correct. Noah, thank you for the $10 donation. Appreciate you. If it stays the same in broad terms, problem strengths, and we need inside offensive line bad, are there really elite interior offensive linemen around pick 20 with quarterback, wide receiver, tackle, edge getting picked high as usual? I hope so. Otherwise, safety, defensive line, please.
Um, Interior offensive linemen almost never go in the top 20. I think, Quentin Nelson went 6th overall,
Mhm.
and that's, like, one of the very rare examples. I don't think a center has ever gone in the top 10 of a draft. I think we've seen a couple go, like, top 15, and I don't think any of those guys are gonna be in this draft. I don't think we're gonna see interior offensive linemen go until about pick 20, 22, 24.
Agreed. An elite, I think, is one where we've got to, when I think of that word, Noah, an elite, I think, okay, it's a no brainer first round graded guard or
Mhm.
center. And there are very few of those that come down the line on a yearly basis. Is there one this year in this draft? No. But are there guys really, really close? Where really, for our purposes and for how much they would upgrade our position versus where it's been, it would really be more of a semantics issue if we really want to get down to that, to the bottom line. Is Cooper Bebe, Graham Barton, Tony Fontanoa, the Jackson Powers kid, who's more of a center, but maybe he can do some guard stuff out of Oregon, are those guys elite? No, but are they very close? Yes. And would they be kind of high floor picks to where you know what you're getting with these guys, and you're not going to have to wait very long to get it? And there's definitely a value into that, to where maybe just get it back to your question on this, Noah. Maybe there's a value in doing that at that point where that draws you to just take that pick, not overthink it, and say, yeah, give me the high floor guy who substantially upgrades this position that's been failing or a weakness for us now for years. But what I would guess, Noah, knowing John Schneider and the way that he typically operates, rather than go that route, what I would believe he would do is he probably moves back to 28, 29, 30, maybe even back in the top of the second round, then goes and gets one of those guys because he has them all similarly graded. So if one or two off the board, he don't care because he's like, well, I like them all. Just give me one or two of those guys, and then picks up an extra second or third round pick back.
Yeah, I just checked. Steve Hutchinson, who is one of the better interior offensive line prospects in recent memory, was
Mhm.
17th overall. So
Mhm.
those guys very rarely go super high in the draft, and
Yeah,
not in this draft, which is loaded at the top.
yeah. To your point, yeah, that's where it's no. You will see what you talk about happening in this draft, where I'm estimating that there's probably 3 to 4 quarterbacks taken in the top 20. You should certainly see probably 2 to 3 wide receivers, probably 2 to 3 tackles, and usually there's at least
Bowers,
3. Yeah,
yeah,
Bowers will be in there, and then at least probably 3 or 4 edges as well when it all
yeah,
gets breaking down. So
and Kool-Aid.
and Kool-Aid. So I
Hmm.
mean, you take
Hmm.
those numbers right there, Brendan. That's like 15, 16 players right there. Where so it's going to push the value of the interior offensive lineman to our pick as well. That's the where this could come back in, Noah, as well. Is that he's your highest value guy on the board too, because there's not been one taken. You're getting the best guard in the draft. You're getting the best center in the draft when you pick at that spot.
Right.
Garth, thank you for the $5 donation. Says Brando, what was your final computer solution with the microphone and all? Also, is there a computer brand you'd stay away from? I'm not a big Lenovo guy. I'll say that.
Mm.
Yes, I had to burn the midnight oil for about a week and a half straight, Garth, and do registry edits and command line um, buggery. But I eventually, Garth, got it around to where I got it fixed. It was just an issue of peeling away everything that I possibly could to get it right. So it wasn't a technical malfunction, which would have made me have to go get another computer, nor a microphone problem. But it was just some of these systems now have different, especially when you start using these microphone like XLRs. They got to talk to this, it's got to talk to that, and it's got to talk to that, and the handoff all has to be clean. There has to be no interruptions, and so that's what I ran into. I'm a big guy on if there's a computer brand I'd say to go to, even though this one I had an issue with. I've had a lot of success with Dells. The bang for the buck is there with them. They're not fancy. They're not going to get you the liquid cooling lights going up and down this and everything, but meat and potatoes just will work. The Honda Accord of computers, it's going to run forever and you're not going to have to do barely any maintenance into it. These have been typically the ones that I lean towards. How about you,
Hmm.
Brendan?
I have been building my own computers for the last decade now, so
He's
I don't really
fancy.
think about it in terms of like brands. I think about it in terms of parts. Back when I was into laptop stuff a little bit, which is like 15 years ago almost now, think Lenovo ThinkPads were actually the really good ones, but I don't think they are anymore.
I've just had
Uh,
so many issues trying to work with them, and
yeah.
they come softwared up to the 9. Not that Dell doesn't either, but
Yeah, I mean,
but
you can always go with the good old Alienware if you really want to go for it, but that's
that's good
a
stuff.
adventure. That's
Yeah.
an different adventure. So yeah, I mean, I built my PC out of like gigabit peripherals. I was using Razer for a long time. Now I'm using Steel Series. But yeah, I don't think I would ever buy a pre-built again. I'm just going to keep building PCs until it becomes. I don't know how it would ever become unwieldy to do so. It's so easy now with the way that it is now versus the way it used to be.
I used to get the soldering irons out
Mhm.
there, and you have to get the head thing on, you know, so
Right.
now you can just kinda tink, 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 put it right in, so it's easy peasy. Yeah. Thank you, Garth, though. If you're out there looking for a new computer, I was able to bring mine back to life. It was good. My computer's rosing like Lazarus. Like
Yeah.
Lazarus. Thank you everybody for all your donos. I offensively let's talk just a little bit here, Brendan, about we got these 3 wide receivers coming in this year, and we are like, man, ideally we can just utilize all 3 of these guys throughout the course of the game and find some really great productivity and lean on them as a big strength within this offense. There'll be other things that do want to have work as well. And here was another game where we find ourselves in where we have a hard time kind of targeting tight ends and getting them featured into the offense. But boy, the wide receivers really did carry the day for us in this football game, did they not? 24 targets, 18 receptions, well over 200 yards between our 3 guys, that being DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Hell of a day for that crew.
Mhm. Yeah, and assuming the Seahawks have some degree of a successful season, at the end of this, be it, making the playoffs. Maybe they have to win a game, maybe not. It depends on your perspective. But the play that's really going to be remembered is the JSN touchdown against Philadelphia. That's going to be remembered as like the turning point. But I'll tell you, I think that 3rd and 14 conversion in this game on that last drive might be my favorite. I might prefer that, because I thought we were done. I was like, 3rd and 14, we're never converting 3rd and 14. That's impossible.
Yeah.
Like that's not in our playbook. And for us to actually run that play where JSN runs over the middle of the field, gets open, catches it, gets the first down, no problem. I think there was a defensive penalty on Tennessee as well. So it's not like that was a do or die play, but for us to do that, like, that was just something that made me so happy to see us use the middle of the field in that situation. Although I got to admit, it makes me wonder, why do we only pull it out when we need to like break the glass in case of emergency? Like, why not pull it out throughout the game?
Did you see the Saul question that he asked Carroll about this?
I don't think so.
Oh, it was that, and I got to give credit to Salk out there. A guy does get his share of shade amongst the Hawk fan base, and sometimes he runs hot and cold with me on the radio. But he's been the one reporter locally who's been willing at times when dealing with Carroll throughout this season to ask some harder questions that we would want to ask. And so Salk said, well, the telecast, it's so funny, Brent, telecast is reaching the point that they're mentioning some of the stuff we talked about. It's gotten to that obvious of a level. So he said the telecast had mentioned that you guys throw more outside the numbers than any team in the NFL. Why do you do that? And it was a great question. Coach Carroll didn't answer it, but it was a great question. And I'm glad that Salk at least raised it up. And like you say, that's what, just to try to talk a little bit kind of on what you're saying there. It's like, it's there. We can utilize this. Teams can plan for the fact be it like our 6-man blitzes or throwing outside the numbers, Brendan, when you do something at like a 32 rate, that's the definition of predictability at that point versus other NFL teams and their rates of how they run it. And it just makes you easier. Doesn't matter which side of the ball you're doing it. It doesn't matter what stat we're leaning to. Now I can predict what you're going to do when you do something to that high of a propensity, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because again, like, they're in a situation where they need to have a big play to save the game and save the season. In that game, 3rd and 14 on the last drive of the game, and they pull it out. Like, they know it's a good play. That's their save the season play, I guess. Go to JSN over the middle. But if you think it's such a good play that you're going to go to it when you're trying to save the season, why wouldn't you go to it throughout the game? Now, I think one thing that's fair to say, and this is part of the reason why the Seahawks have been so good in those end of game situations where they're trying to drive to score, teams sit in 2 high safeties constantly in those situations. And our offense is kind of built to take advantage of that kind of defense where they just keep dropping the safeties back. So I do know that there's some stuff going on those drives where you're trying to kind of take advantage of the way defenses play. But that's not the case for most of the game. Most of the game, there are these defenses that are going to throw all these different looks at you. And I just keep going back to it. Like, we need to attack the middle of the field here. That's what modern teams do. And I look at something like that, and that, more than any win or loss, is why I don't feel like we're going to get to where we want to get to with this current regime in place, because nothing is going to move him off of that belief, even though he can't defend it. You just said it. He didn't say anything.
And I think it's a not defend it. I think it's a not defend it. I think that's the right way to put it, Brendan, because you can't give me he doesn't want to answer the question because it gives a viewpoint into their strategy. The teams know what you're doing. This isn't a strategy thing. We know you throw outside the numbers at the 30 ranked level of NFL teams throughout the NFL. That's not this is a hidden thing as to it just go. We don't have to defend the middle of the field. It just, it is succinctly means just that. And, the fact that I think he didn't answer is a bit telling, because he knows that the answer probably wouldn't be sufficient as to why he does it, as opposed to it being some secret sauce. I'm not going to tell you how we make our secret sauce. I don't know if am I on that one? Do you buy that? Does it resonate the same way to you on that?
I mean, most of the time Pete's been here, his quarterback was Russell Wilson. And we've learned this year that, I mean, even outside the sphere of influence of Pete Carroll, Wilson cannot throw it to the middle of the field. It's just he's literally programmed to be incapable of that, which is why Sean Payton's basically ripped out, I think, 80% of his playbook and just tossed it in the garbage because he's like, well, none of those plays are going to work. So like then it's understandable, but now you've got different quarterbacks. We've seen this team with two different quarterbacks since Russell left, and it didn't change at all, which is bizarre. You would think you would change the way you do things a little bit when you get new personnel in there.
You would.
But here we are having the same conversation every time.
Yeah. I really would like to get an answer, though. I would love to understand, because I can guess and go, well, he thinks there's more turnovers in the middle of the field, but it is, again, back to that whole thing of when you're so predictable across the board in so many ways. We don't run outside. We don't use fly sweeps. We throw outside the numbers. You become so much more easier to defend, regardless of how talented your personnel is. And it's the part that does stand out a little bit with this team right now at times in a needless fashion. Talk about unforced errors on an undisciplined football team at times. This is an unforced error by the coaching staff where you don't have to be this predictable. You can find yourself an advantage without you having to be super sophisticated and intelligent in all of your little X's and O's and how you draw it up. You remove some of the tendencies, what they call those tendency breakers, right, Brendan? Tendency breakers.
Yeah, and maybe that's why we save it for those save the season plays. Maybe we're like, oh, they're never going to see this coming because we never do this, and you just whip it out in that situation. But I think it would be more beneficial if we just did it the whole game.
Yeah, I do too. I think you could just find a lot more flexible. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this is why I kind of feel like there's a disconnect between the coaching and the front office on this team. You draft JSN mostly to attack the middle of the field. That's kind of what he does. So why would you draft JSN and put him on a team that refuses to use the middle of the field? I feel like John made that pick and Pete had to live with it. And now JSN's been great this year. He's been one of the best wide receivers as a rookie that we've ever had. And he's been one of the best rookie wide receivers this year. But I'm also very aware of the fact that his best work is done over the middle of the field. And I'm like, how is this going to work down the line?
Agreed. Yeah, I'm with you. And you've got a lot of his big catches this year have come over the top, running, 9 routes or on bubble screens, not necessarily in the middle of the field, absent that one play that you did talk about. Another guy who had a good game in this one, and a guy that I feel like is part of the plan going forward. He's not the big part of the plan going forward, but he's a guy that's going to be here next year. He's not banged on, but when he gets talked about by Hawk fans at times, it's a little bit like, well, he doesn't really give us much anymore. There's not really much there. I feel like Tyler Lockett again shows you the value he brings here in this game for Geno. It seems like Geno trusts him more as much as any receiver on this team, maybe the most. And when he needs to go to a big catch, I know he did the JSN 3rd and 14, which was huge there. But absent that, it seems like whenever he needs a play to go to, he's going to go find Tyler and look to him. And Tyler came up in this game, I thought, really big with those catches he made throughout this game and being that security blanket for Geno Smith.
Yeah. I think we just have to accept that Lockett's not going to be great in every game he plays because he's getting older. There are just going to be those games where he doesn't have a lot of gas and he's not going to be there, but you need a plan for that. You need to work to mitigate that. You needed to say, okay, we're not going to try to make him somebody who has to get targeted 10 times in every single game we play. He's not somebody who's going to be able to carry the offense the way maybe once upon a time we could.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So yeah, I think the best thing that we can do is figure out what we can do with the Lockett that we have rather than lament the Lockett that we don't have and get rid of the Lockett that we do have because he's not the Lockett that we used to have. And I swear that made sense in my head.
No, it adds up to me. It totally added up to me. So I completely get where you're coming from with it, and I feel the same way. So I'd love our receiving core going forward, Brendan. DK, Tyler, JSN, Jake Bobo, even Derek Young coming in there and doing what he does. You're really set there right now going forward. And you've got a nice mix between some guys you're paying and some cheap value in there as well. But these guys are going to be both a part of what we got going on now as a strength on this team here this year and going into the future. Well over 200 yards, efficiently done too, Brendan. It wasn't like it took him 35 targets in the game, 24 targets, 18 catches. Really well done there by the receiving core. Was there anybody else on offense that, stood out to you in this game and what they played for good or bad on it, or any part of the offense that you thought that stood out to you in this game, good or bad?
I guess Colby, game-winning touchdown catch.
Yeah.
Same kind of play we tried to run against the Bengals, but Gino didn't have time to get it to him.
Hmm.
This time he did.
Yeah.
But it's the same basic idea. Just post up on a guy who's 10 inches shorter than you, and we're winning this game.
Yeah. I love it on Gino's part there to give him and Gino, there's some spots in the game frustrating, but there's some things I really do like with what he did. The DK throw, for instance, giving DK a chance to actually reel that ball in bounds. It's an underrated throw from where he puts the ball placement of that, because sometimes he's throwing guys out of bounds, Brendan. It's like that JSN throw to the back of the end zone where JSN bangs his knee into the concrete slab. And you're going, Gino, put it 2 yards. He's got to throw that a second and a half earlier and then
Right.
put it in bounds. And it was just good on some of these throws where like that, give Colby a chance, truly give him a chance. You need this touchdown. You have 2 down territory. And you and I've talked about Colby's got this ability. He had it at Stanford. We just never have called upon it, but he's got the ball skills. He's got the length. He's got the size to be a guy down there that could be a factor in the red zone, especially for a team that's 26th coming into this game in red zone efficiency, 2 of 4 in this game. So he's a guy you can come back to on this, I think, as we go forward a little bit, because there's not many teams that can match up with him. Everybody's going to be caught up with DK and Tyler and JSN. He'll become a bit of that forgotten man in that structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. I still struggle with. Do you think we're going to be able to keep Parkinson this offseason?
If you can find a low-end contract for him, I think they are going to try to extend negotiations with him and hope that they can bring him in on some real low-end kind of deal where they go, we're going to move off of Noah. We're going to keep Disley here. We're going to keep you here. We have 2 inline tight end guys. We'll go to more 3 wide receiver sets going into the future with the talent we have at the wide receiver position, and then don't have 3 tight ends anymore. Now you have the 1 extra receiver, and then just make that as a kind of a tonal shift of the offense. Because they've already started that way with how they're using these tight ends, right?
Yeah,
Like
I wonder what
they're
kind of
already.
offer. I wonder what kind of offer he's going to get. He doesn't have big numbers, but somebody's going to look at his size and be like, I might offer this guy like 8 mil, 9 mil a year. I wonder.
You're right. If there's that team that creatively looks at his efficiency and goes, he's got ball skills they never really try to take advantage of because they don't take advantage of their tight end stuff there.
Mhm.
Do they think a little bit? It's going to require somebody to think out the box to pay him that kind of money. I think that they'll try to get him on more of a $4 million, 3-year, $12 million deal. Something like that is probably what they try to pull him on, give him 4 million bonus and see if you can get him a little bit more on that cheap. That's probably maybe dreaming, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not sure the market for him right now.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who could slip through the cracks and just get like vet min. Like that
Mhm.
happens sometimes. If
Yeah.
you're not elite, you're liable to just slip through the cracks completely.
There's a wide variance, isn't there, between that? And that's what makes it where those guys where they're an NFL player, they could play this league, they've got some upside to them, but is somebody really signing up to spend that money to get it done there? I will say the tight end position has been pretty weak in drafts recently, so there may be a scarcity to this too that drives some of this, where it's just because there's been so few coming out, there'll be so many teams that are in kind of desperate need to go get one. Hence, then the value gets pushed up that much higher because of it.
Yeah. I found it very annoying and troublesome that Noah Fant was on the field for like 47 snaps and didn't get targeted once. It feels like we're doing something wrong or he's doing something wrong for that to be true.
Yeah, Noah's been a tough one to peg this year. He's actually having a down year from what he did last year. He was your lowest graded player by PFF on the offensive side of the ball in this game on those 47 snaps, accumulating only in a 41 grade. It would seem by their 47 grade that they're attributing to him, Brendan, that he's just not getting open on his routes, which is surprising because when he came here, he was one of the league leaders in average separation per route run, yard separation per route run. I said that kind of weird when he came here from Denver. And last year that showed on some of the plays. He's given us some good plays this year, but we don't go to him. We don't commit to going to him, and we absolutely forget about him. I don't know if he's just in the doghouse or what it is, but he's not in the doghouse not playing. He's playing, but we don't look to target him very often.
Yeah. I don't get it.
Uh, John, thank you for another $5 donation. I appreciate you. You're actually bringing up a subject I want to cover here with Brendan today. Am I crazy, or could DK be the top of the line? Could be a top of the line 15 to 20 target kind of guy. What's it going to take? A new OC or a quarterback? Great question. Great question, John.
Mhm. I don't see why he couldn't. I think it's pretty rare you find a guy who would have a massive drop off in efficiency if they get more volume. There are guys like that, but I don't think DK is one of them.
No, I don't think he's one of them either. And John, you know this about me. I'm one of the biggest DK people there is out there, and I think that he's a guy that there's certainly has real more potential than they've been able to get out of him so far. And that's saying something, because I was looking at the numbers today, Brendan. He's going to end up this year with career yardage somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5,400 yards receiving after 5 seasons. And if you look at him all time for where he's going, he's I think just turned 26 years old here in December. So he's going to have a good chance when you get to next year before the age of 27, which is a pretty substantial long NFL career at that point. By the time he turns 27, he will be in the top probably 4 all time for the most yards before the age of 27 of anybody in NFL history. I mean, go look at the numbers if you think I'm lying on it. And yet I still find myself standing here saying there's more to be had here. There's more to be got here. We haven't even begun to really fully, in my opinion, pull the lid off this and get the most out of him. So yeah, I do believe he can, John. New OC and quarterback. My answer is, you say OC or quarterback. My answer is yes. Probably the answer is going to be both. Waldron's been given this game-changing talent and forgets about it for 2.5 quarters. That doesn't make sense to me. He just started 80% into this year to align DK into the slot when he started to, recognize a little bit that he wasn't able to get DK those targets or really get him the opportunities that he should be being given. Having a quarterback in there that can throw some passes into DK where we don't get the one side being Russell, where it has to be a stop route or a go route. And then even on some of the go routes I throw you, I'll have this tendency with my moon ball to have you slow up so that the guy can catch back up to you, which kind of runs counter to a guy that runs 4-3, who you want to separate and throw the ball out ahead of him. Then you've got the flip side to a guy like Geno Smith, who has a tendency on the 9 routes to throw DK 3 yards out of bounds and not even then give him a chance to make a catch on those plays. So getting a QB that can actually make those throws and make them how you typically throw a 9 route, which is you throw it, it goes to the receiver or nobody, right? Because Russ liked to do that thing where he's going to give his guy a chance to go up and kind of contest and catch it, but throw it out in front. Then the defender can't get back in the play, can't make a play on the ball.
Right.
And then your receiver gets it or nobody gets it. That's the rule of how you used to throw. Usually we'll throw those 9 routes. So getting a guy that can throw those better will certainly help DK out, considerably well. So I'm with you, John. I think he can for sure.
Yeah. I don't think it has. I don't think his limitations have anything to do with him.
Mm-hmm. No, not at all. Not at all. And hopefully they can continue to work to kind of take steps to take advantage of that this off season, Brendan. Long live the king. Thank you for another $5 donation. It says, with a 5th round pick, we could truly consider drafting a special teams return man like the Cowboys did with Turpin. That field position really matters.
I mean, not if they keep legislating it out of the game like they are. I'd like to know what their plans are for the rules over the next couple of years before I commit to that. But it's a 5th round pick. It's certainly not a terrible idea.
Yeah, if you can find a guy that can bring the special element to it, I'm open to it, King. I think Brendan brings up a great point, though, in that the NFL is just slowly every offseason legislating the return game out little by little from it. And part of what I really want from it as much as anything is it's not the return yardage. And in the case of DJ Dallas, for instance, my issue comes into it of he's not comfortable back there doing it. And you have to have a guy back there that can catch it in all elements. Is it windy? Is it wet? That they're sure-handed. I don't maybe need to get a lot from my return game, especially understanding how good these punters have gotten, King. That's the other part of it beyond just the rules. These punters have gotten marvelous at both getting the height and the distance on these kicks to where the punt returners can't do much to get much return yardage. But I just want a guy back there that can field it. In DJ Dallas's case, Brendan mentioned one of the things that drives me crazy about him is that he doesn't like to run up and make the catches up. So he'll let them then bounce and roll another 30 yards behind him. I want a guy that's comfortable enough to come up and Lockett was great with this. You run up and then you slide on your knees and you make the catch. And because you fair caught, nobody can come up and hit you. You fair caught, let them know that you're fair catching it. So no defender is going to come up and, rail you, but you can't let it bounce. You got to be able to come up and go make that catch there in that moment. And he's just not comfortable doing it. And so I think as much as anything, I'm okay with the 5th round pick, King, but let's just putting a guy back there that's naturally suited to do it, who has it in their actual skill set to really comfortably do it, not be forced to do it, which it feels to me like Dallas has kind of been forced to do it rather than he likes to do it.
Right. Absolutely.
But, thank you. And King, thank you for all your donos. You're awesome, brother. One last guy I want to talk to here as we kind of start to wrap this up a bit here today is the guy's got maybe a strong argument to be at times to be maybe the offensive MVP on this team in moments, and that's Michael Dixon had himself another really great game here out there in this one. He was again kicking for distance, 2 kicks inside the 20-yard line, 59-yard long, 51-yard average. He continues to have one of the more remarkable starts for a punter. And I know you talk about this to a DK. Both him and DK are having some of the greatest starts for those guys at their positions in NFL history, if you really look at the grand perspective of things on these kind of guys and what they're doing. But just nothing much more to say other than Dixon's really good, and he's really good all the way around.
Yeah, there's really not too much to say other than that. He's single-handedly keeping our special teams unit afloat this year, because without him, it's pretty bad. I guess the coverage unit's pretty good.
Yeah, they've been good on their side, but to your point, it's been a weaker year across the board in other areas of it. So he's at least been able to flip some field positions and getting you still inside the 20 at times as well. So great season by Dixon. Should be an All-Pro this year. I hope he is, and continues to be a guy that just is awesome every single week. There's never any fluctuation with him. Every single week you can count on him to bring his duties. Gotta get some more Australians in the house, Brendan. That's the key, man. Need some more Australians.
Yeah, I wish we could. I wish we could let him do drop kicks on these field goals, man.
Hey, I bet he'd do it good. I bet he'd be over 80%. You know what I mean?
You wanna boost the legend of Michael Dixon in Seattle. Let him do some drop kicks.
Oh my God. We know no one gonna need a kicker. We got our kicker here in Apuna. It's my Australian accent. Oh, well, Brendan, any other final thoughts on this game walking out of it? Any other last little things that at the forefront of your mind?
Not really, no. I mean, it's a win. It's not a great win or anything like that. I'm not jumping up and down about it, but I'm feeling like this team is probably good enough to get into the dance. And I guess by some technical level, that marks an improvement over last year. I don't know how every part of this team is worse than it was last year, I think. Let's think about this for a second. If the Seahawks win out, which is a pretty reasonable bet, they have a better record than they did last year on a harder schedule.
Yes.
Right? Their offense is almost definitely going to be worse because the offense was actually really good last year. The defense is probably going to be worse or about as bad. The special teams is going to be worse because Myers fell off a cliff. The offensive line has been worse. The running game's been worse. The only thing that's really improved is the pass rush. The run defense didn't. It's like this feels like a Twilight Zone episode or something. Like how did we get better, even though we got worse?
Yeah, I don't even have a really good answer when it comes to that. I mean, it's when you sum it up like that, it's kind of like it's kind of that's where it's been a little bit, is that on paper you shouldn't be a game better in your record going up against it, as you said, a tougher schedule.
Yeah.
That should equate out to being a couple losses. And the one thing this team's got, the one thing I'll give them credit for is, they have a lot of grit. There could have been an easy part here after that 4 or 5 games in a row you lost to kind of like pack it in and go, okay, the energy's not right here. The buy-in started to feel less, and the team circled the wagons, Brendan, and did find the resiliency that I like to see. Some fans have been like, well, I don't want him to win because of this, or I don't want to win. You and I have been of the same mind on this, wanting to see him win. Anything can happen in the playoffs. Are the odds long? Sure, the odds are long. But balls can bounce funny. Injuries can happen at weird times. Teams can just not show up for a given game when you thought that they were going to, when you were sure they were going to be dominant, and they would just roll through this one team. So get in the dance, anything can happen. And if it's not a big step forward, maybe it's a marginal step forward. And at least that is the bottom line. Even just from a record standpoint, Brendan, it's progress. It's progress.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, that's one thing we can say after these last 2 games for sure. After the Niners loss, the second Niners loss, that KJ Wright interview that he did, he said basically the team has quit on Pete Carroll. That was his implication. After these last 2 games, we can safely say that at the very least they haven't quit on they haven't quit. If they had quit, they would not have won these last 2 games. If they had actually quit on Carroll, they would have laid down and lost these last 2. So at the very least, this team has not quit on our organization, let's call it.
No, they're out there. They're doing what they can. They're giving their all. Everybody's out there. It's, I agree with you. You can feel it when people aren't buying in. When that spirit's prevalent and going on with the team. And it's something that I would say has been good to see, especially that Eagles game. You were going to get by on that if guys, you're not winning that game if you're just, going through the motions, so to speak. So I think some of it helps in some of the changes they made from a personnel front, getting, certain guys in and out and how that definitely improves some things. But the bottom line is now 2 wins in a row, Brendan. We control our fate. We win out, we get out. We get in. We win out, we get in. So get these 2 victories. You're in. You got a chance at that point. That's the best you can ask for. If you can't be an elite team at this time of year, Brendan, this is at least the second best thing to be at. So we don't have to wait on anybody else to lose here. We don't have to wait we don't need the Lions to go into Lambeau in the last game of the year in the Tundra to get us in. Win twice against 2 teams that we can win with. You and I will be previewing this on Thursday at 8:00. And we got it. So there is at least that to feel very encouraged by with this year. It's fun to be in the dance. It's fun to be part of the last teams in there, and anything can happen in the playoffs, man.
Absolutely.
Well, do me a favor, folks, and please do hit that like button here on this video, as well as sub up if you haven't already. We just crossed 14,700 here, 14,700 today on the channel. So I thank you to all the new subscribers out there as well. Head on over to Seahawks Brendan Nelson here on YouTube and subscribe up with him if you haven't already on that side of things. Brendan, thank you for doing this throughout this season. I've had an awesome time doing it. Of course, we will continue on forward, but thank you, man, for doing these Double Dip shows every single week as you do. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on.
And thank you to guys for watching. I shouldn't have to do a pulse check at this point. I shouldn't have to do a heat check at this point, saying, where are my Hawk fans at? Are you ready? You ready to go to the playoffs? You ready to shock the world? You ready to shock the nation? Maybe. Who knows? Anything can happen. Well, we are. So I hope you guys are too. We shouldn't have to remind you, as you have a team just about on the edge to go in the playoffs, to maybe go back and find and carve out a tough trail to get themselves back to Lombardi. But you know what? Me and Brendan are going to do it anyway, because that's just what we do here. So my fellow Seahawks faithful, we are on the road to the playoffs. We control our own fate. 2 more games to go, and we will find out where this team stands. So until we come back to you 2 days from now, please, my fellow Hawk fans, do not ever forget. Don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.